This is the How Did We Get Here podcast with your host, Nancy Jackson.
Hi, I'm Nancy Jackson. I'm the host of How Did We Get Here? And I'm glad that you came back again today. And I wanted to introduce myself to you and give you a little background about myself, as it might help as we go along. And I want to start with a little story. This is about something that happened to me when I was very young. I was sitting in the cafeteria at St. Joseph's Academy in Frontenac, Missouri. And it was lunchtime, of course. And I had just come from a religion class. And at that time, all the teachers were religious sisters. They all wore full habits, long black veils, the white thing underneath there. And they were all, pretty good teachers. I guess when you're a teenager and a young kid, you really don't really know why you're there, what you're doing. You're kind of in a fog. Well, that was me. And but I also paid attention in class, and I wanted to learn. And I did have a lot of respect for the sisters. Anyway, we had been the subject had been the apparition of the Blessed Mother, that is Mary, the mother of Jesus, in 1917 in Fatima, when she appeared to three young children, two girls and a boy. And the oldest, I think, was about 11, and the youngest was about 9. And they were out tending sheep and away from the little village where they lived. It was a very, very small, remote place in Portugal. And this woman appeared to them. And she appeared to them on the 13th of the month from, I think it was from April until October. And it took them a while to figure out who she was. And but she talked to them and they listened, and it was as real as anything to them. And they were completely convinced of the reality of her visits. And they talked to her and asked her questions, and she told them things and asked them to deliver messages for her. And her basic message was to ask people to pray and to repent for their sins and to return to God. And that if the world did not change, there was going to be all kinds of trouble. And there were going to be wars and catastrophes coming. And she mentioned the year of 1960 and said that 1960 was going to be the beginning of a huge change. And so anyway, I listened to all of this in the classroom, and then we went to lunch. And I brought all of that with me into the cafeteria. So I'm sitting there, and we did talk. There was a whole table full of girls, and we did talk about it a little bit. But I was really worried about it. And I remember thinking, what could possibly go wrong? The world had been pretty good up until then. I was pretty happy. My world was, was a small world. It was a young girls, adolescent girls world, but it was a simple and pretty happy life that I had. So I couldn't imagine anything that would be that terrible that could happen. But little did I know that the 60s were going to be just an explosion of revolution. The world was going to be turned upside down, and it would never be the same again. And what I realize now, looking back, is that I was, and I'm going to use the example of a roller coaster. I was sitting in the front car of this wild roller coaster of the 1960s that was whipping up and down and spinning in all directions. And I was an eyewitness to the whole thing. And some of it was exhilarating and some of it was terrifying. But I will tell you that the whole world changed with the 1960s. And we could spend days and days and hours exploring all of that. And I know there are many books that have been written on the 60s. But because I was a personal witness to it, I feel like I can talk with some authority. And things that change, for instance, the music. And, you know, there was rock and roll in the 50s, and it was happy music. It was good music. It was fun. And I remember Fats Domino and that song, Ain't That a Shame? It was just a really good song to dance to. It was a lot of fun. But by the end, you know, we were listening to the Beatles, and they had a song called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which was code for LSD. And we were in the drug culture by the end of the 1960s. So that alone kind of gives you some idea of some of the changes that took place. President Kennedy was assassinated. That was a real shocker. And Martin Luther King was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated while he was campaigning for presidency. There was the pill was introduced and made accessible to the public, I think in 1962. There were all kinds of, there was Vatican II, the Second Vatican Council took place, and that took place from 1962 to 1965. And that brought with it all kinds of unexpected changes, some good, some bad, but it was very radical at the time. And I remember my parents and all of their friends were so upset because of all the changes that were being made through Vatican II. And it was hard for people to understand what was really going on because there were all these changes, but you know, for people being brought up to date, it's kind of hard to keep up with all of that and have it explained to you as it's going on. So it was a real time of turmoil. And then there was the war of in the Middle East and or in Southeast Asia and in Vietnam and communism and all of that going on. And there were people that were rioting and protesting against that. And there were revolutions going on and riots and political, well, I remember there was the Democratic convention, political convention held in Chicago, and there were riots there. And there were pictures on TV of policemen hitting people with their batons and just all kinds of violence going on. And it was really shocking. I mean, here was, we had lived pretty, you know, I kind of call it the golden age from the late, after World War II, and then up until 1960 was kind of a golden era. There was a period of prosperity and there were, you know, it was post-war baby boom, and there were a lot of good things that were happening and a lot of prosperity for a lot of people. Things were being rebuilt after the war. And then to have all of this come crashing down in the 60s, it was a real shock. And so anyway, the reason that I'm bringing it up is that I feel like I was an eyewitness to that. And in the middle of all of it, I still kept my faith. I have always had a strong faith. And I was very lucky that I've had really good education and access to lots of good information as I was going along. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for a lot of things, but that in particular. And not that there weren't ups and downs and a lot of problems, because there were, but I didn't realize it at the time. And as you're going through these things, you don't even know what's happening. And it's a lot of things were done under the radar without the public's awareness. And it was like there was such an explosion of change. There was no way that you could possibly integrate and understand everything as it was happening. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself that way and let you see a little bit about my background and how I've come to this place where I am today. But anyway, I wanted to mainly talk about the 60s and how that was a very consequential period in the life of our culture, our country, and the whole world. And I hope that we can talk more about this. And I plan to really focus on the sexual revolution of the 60s, because that was one of the biggest things that took place. And Kate Millett was a revolutionary who started the National Organization for Women. And her sister has an account of what it was like to live with her during this time. And she was an eyewitness to some of the things that they were doing in the National Organization of Women and the consciousness raising sessions that they had and what their goals were. And it was just one more shocking thing after another. Anyway, I could go on, but I hope that you will come back and tune in again. I hope that you like the show and that you'll become a regular. And if you do have any questions or comments, I invite you to send them to me. My email address is howdidwegethere1884 @gmail.com. And also, I would also like you to think about this question. How has your life changed in the last, well, I'd say the last 15 years? What have been the biggest changes that you have noticed? Send it to me, and I'd love to see your comments, and I hope to see you again real soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the How Did We Get Here podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends and family. For more information and to connect with Nancy, email howdidwegethere1884 @gmail.com.